What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. We continue here with my 2024 college football schedule preview and projected record series. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish are up next before we preview their schedule for 2024 and give them an early projected record based on how tough that schedule is. Let's take a look at what Notre Dame did back in 2023. Here were my projections and predictions last year for Notre Dame. My projection had them at 11-1, and then my prediction for them was 9-3, so I was a little bit different there with my projection and prediction on this team. Notre Dame, of course, going 9-3 in the regular season last year in 2023, so I was right on the money with my prediction last year for this Notre Dame team. But if you count their bowl game victory against Oregon State, Notre Dame, of course, going 10-3 last year, so a 10-win season overall in 2023 in Marcus Freeman's second year as the head coach for Notre Dame. Here was the schedule from last year in the regular season for the Fighting Irish. You look at their opponents that they played outside of ACC opponents. Remember, Notre Dame is not a conference team. They're an independent school, so they do play mostly ACC football teams. They, of course, played Navy in Dublin, Ireland. That ended up being not really a close game at all. Tennessee State, Central Michigan. They played Ohio State out of the Big Ten, and then they played a couple of Pac-12 teams, USC and Stanford on the road, which they do play every single year out of the Pac-12. You look at the losses last year for Notre Dame. They lost at home to Ohio State there in a close game, and then they lost a couple of games here to ACC teams here, both on the road. They lost to Louisville and Clemson, both on the road, so 3 losses last year for Notre Dame. They had a pretty tough non-ACC schedule last year. Let's now look ahead to 2024. Here is the schedule for Notre Dame heading into the upcoming season. Before we go game by game and preview each and every single individual game on this schedule, let's take a look at who Notre Dame will play outside of their ACC opponents. Remember, of course, they're not a conference team. They do play mostly ACC teams, though. So this is their non-ACC schedule for this year. They will play Texas A&M on the road. Of course, that's the big one coming up here in week number 1. Then they play Northern Illinois, Purdue on the road as well, Miami of Ohio University Redhawks, and then they played Navy. That, of course, a game where it will be held in New Jersey on a neutral site venue. And then they play Army. This game has not been officially confirmed, but they're kind of leading towards, Army to put here on this schedule for Notre Dame. But other than that, the game has not been officially confirmed as of this recording. And then, of course, they'll play USC here on the road. So they do play USC once again, and that game will be, of course, on the road. So you look at this non-ACC schedule for Notre Dame. A couple of tough road games with USC and Texas A&M, but I don't think it's really that bad compared to last year non-ACC schedule. Remember, you had to play Ohio State last year, and that was a home game for them, but they still ended up losing that game. So that's the non-ACC schedule for the Fighting Irish. Let's go back to the schedule now for 2024. And let's go game by game now. So Notre Dame will play Texas A&M here in week number 1 to begin the season on August 31st. And then they play Northern Illinois here on September the 7th at home. And then they go on the road to face Purdue here on September the 14th. And then they play Miami of Ohio University Redhawks here on September the 21st. And then they play their first official ACC opponent here. They'll play Louisville here at home on September the 28th. And then Notre Dame gets a bye week after that Louisville game. They get a bye week, and they come out of the bye week, gets in the month of October. They'll play Stanford here at home on October the 12th, and then they play Georgia Tech here on the road on October the 19th. Then they play Navy here. Again, that game's going to be in New Jersey on a neutral site venue. That game will be there on October the 26th. And then Notre Dame gets another bye week here. So they do get a bye week here in the first weekend of the month of November, just like the first weekend here in the month of October. They'll play Florida State here at home on November 9th. Then they play Virginia here at home on November 16th. And then there's that game against Army. Again, that game has not been officially confirmed just yet on November 23rd. But we are assuming it's going to be Army here in this game against, Notre Dame and everything. So we'll see if they go ahead and go with Army here on November 23rd. And again, Notre Dame's 12th-game schedule has not been officially confirmed just yet. But then they'll close things out here with the rivalry game against USC on the road here on November 30th. So that's the schedule for Notre Dame in 2024. My thoughts on this schedule, I think it's a pretty easy schedule compared to last year. I know you got a couple of tough road games with USC and Texas A&M, both out of the non-ACC schedule, but the good news about this schedule is that you get Louisville and Florida State both at home, and you get Virginia, no North Carolina on the schedule, and no, no like Clemson on the schedule this year. That's the really good news as well. And obviously no Ohio State like last year as well. So this is a pretty well-built schedule for Notre Dame. Let's now get to the projection here and find out what the projection is for Notre Dame in 2024. And again, this is not an official prediction. This is simply a projection based on how tough the schedule is. This is the scale I use here for my projections. If it's a 1% game in the red, you can count those games as automatic losses. 20% games in the orange are games are going to be about a couple touchdowns of underdogs. 40% games in the yellow, they'll be about a heavy underdog game by about a touchdown at 40% in the yellow. 50-50 games, though, will stay in the white. Games I think can go either way. 60% games, Notre Dame will be favored by at least a touchdown in the purple at 60%. And then the 80% games here in the blue, they'll be favored by a couple touchdowns. And then the 99% games here in the green, these are your easy wins, automatic wins as well here for Notre Dame. Well, they'll be favored by more than 3 touchdowns. So that is the scale I use here for my projections. You probably won't see any of those red, orange, or yellow games on the schedule just because Notre Dame will be favored by almost every single one of their games. So let's start with the green games here, the automatic wins here for Notre Dame for 2024. And I think you got 5 of them on this schedule: Northern Illinois, Miami of Ohio University Redhawks, and then Navy here in New Jersey, and then Virginia and Army here in the month of November. So I think you can count these 5 games that you're seeing in the green as wins for Notre Dame. I think you can count them as automatic wins by more than 3 touchdowns. Navy, Virginia, and Army, though, these are 3 games that you probably have to put at least at 90% just because Navy and Army are 2 teams that will run that triple option and try to waste the clock down. And again, that Army game has not been officially confirmed, but we're going to assume that Notre Dame will be favored by more than 3 touchdowns in that game. And then same thing with Virginia. They're an ACC team, so I have to at least put that game at 90%, but it's still a green game either way. And then Miami of Ohio University Redhawks and Northern Illinois, a couple of cupcake games here for Notre Dame. These 2 teams, you can put them at least over 95%. Notre Dame should be automatically a big favorite here in both of these cupcake games. So all 5 of these games, I got Notre Dame being favored here by at least more than 3 touchdowns and count them as automatic wins. So let's now go to the next percentage here in the blue, the games at 80%. The games where Notre Dame will be favored by a couple touchdowns. And I got a couple of them on this schedule. Purdue on the road and Stanford here at home. Purdue is a road game. That's the reason why it ended up here in the blue. If this game was at home for Notre Dame, I definitely would put it in the green, but it still would have been at least like 90% just because it's Purdue and they're a Big Ten team. But with it being on the road, that definitely is a blue game in my opinion for Notre Dame, but they are still going to be favored by at least a couple touchdowns. And Stanford, I know they're a rivalry game. You never know what can happen here in these rivalry games, but Notre Dame is playing them at home. But I'm going to put it at least as a blue game just because it's a rivalry and everything. I know Stanford wasn't really good last year. If this game was on the road at Stanford, I definitely would put that as a purple game just because it's a very tough environment to play in. But I think Notre Dame will be a favorite here in both of these games by at least a couple touchdowns. We also count these blue games as like wins as well, but they're not really like guaranteed wins and automatic wins. They're like slight wins. They're only going to be like favored by double digits in both of these games. So both of these games that you're seeing in the blue, I think Notre Dame will be favored by at least a couple touchdowns. Let's go to the purple games now at 60%. The games where Notre Dame will be favored by at least a touchdown. And I just got one game on here, and that's Georgia Tech here on the road on October 19th. This game on the road is definitely a trap game in my opinion here for Notre Dame. Georgia Tech made a ton of improvement last year as a program. They seem like they're heading in the right direction. And I think they have a chance to probably compete with Notre Dame in this game just because they're playing at home. And we saw that last year with Georgia Tech. Again, they made a lot of improvements last year, and we do kind of expect them to kind of improve a little bit this year as well. So that game is definitely a trap game there on the road at Georgia Tech. And again, Notre Dame, I think, will be still favored either way, though, by at least a touchdown. But again, that's going to be a trap game there against Georgia Tech here on October 19th on the road. So that's the only game that I see Notre Dame favored by at least a touchdown. And then the rest of the games that you're seeing here in the white, Texas A&M on the road, Louisville, Florida State, both at home, and then USC here on the road. These are definitely your 50-50 games in my opinion. Like I said, I don't think there's going to be any games on here that Notre Dame will be underdogs in. Texas A&M is definitely a very tough game to start out the year for Notre Dame, especially when Texas A&M has a first-year head coach and everything. You never know what can happen. And again, playing on the road at Kyle Field is definitely one of the toughest places to play in college football. And then Louisville here at home on September the 28th. I know that's a game that Notre Dame should be favored in, but honestly, Louisville beat Notre Dame last year. That's the reason why this is a 50-50 game. And then, of course, Florida State here. That's obviously a 50-50 game. Florida State's going to lose a lot of talent from last year's team, but, Notre Dame, you kind of favor them at least here just because they're playing at home. But, again, that's still a 50-50 game, in my opinion, that can go either way. And then USC here on the road, that's definitely a 50-50 game because it's a rivalry game. You never know what can happen. So all four of these games that you're seeing in the white, Notre Dame will be at least a 50-50 game here. These are four games that definitely could really go either way. So let's now get a projected record here for Notre Dame based on this schedule for 2024. And again, this is not an official prediction. This is simply a projection based on how tough the schedule is. So we count the green games. You count those 5 green games as automatic wins. Then you count those blue games as slight wins. And then you average out the purple game here at 60% against Georgia Tech. Then you average out the 50-50 games at 50%. You split those 50-50 games. Let's say they win 2 out of the 4 games here in the 50-50 range. And the overall projected record that you get for Notre Dame comes out to be 10-2 for 2024. So 10-2 is my projection here for Notre Dame. Again, this is not an official prediction. Like I said, this is a projection based on the schedule. And this schedule really sets up well for Notre Dame for 2024. And again, a couple of tough road games with Texas A&M and USC, but those are definitely very winnable games just because they're both 50-50 games in my opinion. So again, you split those 50-50 games, they would lose like 2 of them, and then they at least like win 2 of them as well, and that would give you a projection of about 10-2 here for this Notre Dame team. So I was a little bit under with this projection here for Notre Dame. I had them at 11-1 last year. This year is 10-2 for me in 2024. So give me your thoughts on this Notre Dame team down in the comments below. What do you think their projected record is for 2024? Give me your best case and worst case scenario for this Notre Dame team as well down in the comments below. Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned here for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports Channel.